all the details at that point, but I just knew God was calling me. So as I answered the call, roughly, I just told God, God, I'm here. If you want me out preaching the gospel, you're going to have to get me out. I have a guaranteed enlistment. I'm under contract. I can't just walk out. And within 3 days, our commander came in and said that they had too many in our field and that if anybody wanted out, they could get out. And so within about 10 days after that, I was a civilian again, went out to preach the gospel. Shortly after that, met my wife, married, and within a year we had a child on the way. And our first daughter was actually born in 1978, and she was born with what's called a hemangioma tumor. Now, hemangioma tumor is a tumor, it's made up of blood vessels, put it that way, and when she was born, it was about the size of my fist. And what made her case unique, as a matter of fact, she was in the AMA Medical Journal because of this tumor, because of where it was. Many tumors like that are in the body in different areas, but hers was in her tongue. And so when she was born, her tongue was about the size of my fist, which was almost the size of her head. It was very horrible to look at, but obviously she was our child and we loved her. And immediately at that time, I just began studying healing. Obviously there was a need, and so we started going into it. And I sat under the best teachers at the time. If I named them, you would know them. And they gave me the best they had. They taught me the best they knew. And we were getting results, and we got results and other people we'd prayed for. And we just, it was good. It was good teaching, and it got me into the Word of God. It got me to studying the Word of God for myself. But it didn't get the job done. And then shortly after that, 1980, my son John was born. As a matter of fact, March 9th, 1980, he was born. And then by the next year, February 13th of 1981, our first daughter Erica passed away. And whenever she passed away, I'll never forget, because it was, like I said, it was on Friday the 13th in February, and the next day was Valentine's Day. And as we took her to that little grave site, and I stood out there, it was cold, stood out at the cemetery, and as we put that little casket down into the ground, I'll never forget it, because I remember standing beside that casket, because I'd called everybody that was teaching me faith and teaching me healing and all these things. I called everyone on the phone and couldn't reach one. And so I stood at that grave and I made a vow to God, and I said, God, there was no man for me when I needed one. But if you will teach me, I will be that man for somebody else someday. And so that started me on the journey of really seeking after healing. And I began doing more study. By this time I'd heard about this man. I'd heard about Smith Wigglesworth, and I heard about this man named John G. Lake, and I heard that he had trained people to heal the sick. And I thought, boy, somebody, it's one thing to be able to do it, it's another thing to be able to teach it and pass it on to other people. And so I started trying to find out about this man, John G. Lake, about where was he and what was going on. And I eventually found his daughter and his son-in-law that was living up in Washington State. So I began calling them on the telephone and talking with them and asking questions. And every Monday I would call and I would ask, 20 questions. And then he would give me all the answers he had. I'd ask how Dr. Lake prayed, what he believed, and what he teach, just different things. And then after he gave me the answers, I would spend all week going into the Bible and verifying that the answers were biblical. And the next Monday I had a whole new set of questions, and so I'd start all over again. And he started giving me names of people to talk to, people that had worked with Dr. Lake that were still alive at that time. He gave me the name of some DHTs, Divine Healing Technicians, that Dr. Lake had trained. And it was at this time that roughly in 81, going on up, we had a relationship up until 87. Gertrude passed away in 86, and then Wilford Wright, the son-in-law, passed away in 87. And just before he passed away, he started asking me questions about my testimony, what was going on, different things. And so I told him, and he wanted to know the date that I was hit by the car. And I thought, well, that's a strange request. So I had to go ask my mom, what date was that? And she said, well, that was September 16th of 1960. And as I went back and told him, he said, yeah, that's what I figured. And he said, he showed me and actually told me the information about the prophecy, sent a letter, sent all the information. I was reading it. And actually what the prophecy said was this. It says, talking about the person that would pick up the ministry, it said, he shall be born when this country has stopped growing. For I will bring him forth in the very last days. He shall consecrate himself to me even as he was consecrated as a child. Now, first off, it says he will be born when the country has stopped growing. Now, if you look at when the states, obviously the country will never stop growing in population, so it wasn't referring to population. But if you look at when the last state was added to the Union, it was 1959. And 1959, of course, was when I was born. Then, later on in the prophecy, and there's a lot to it actually, but the last part of it says this: the enemy will try to kill him 65 years from the date of my death. Before his second score of years, he shall see all these things begin. Now, when it says that the enemy shall try to kill him 65 years from his death, well, Dr. Lake died September 16th, 1935. Now, a score is 20 years, and a score in 5 years, obviously, is 25 years. So if you take September 16th, 1935, move forward 25 years, you come to September 16th, 1960, which was the date that I was hit by the car and the accident took place. So because of those two major events, and because of the questions that I was asking Wolford, he said that was what confirmed that I was the person that he was supposed to pass this ministry on to. Even he and Gertrude used to say that they were not carrying Dr. Lake's ministry, they were merely holding it until they found who they were supposed to pass it to. So when they did, they began passing me a lot of information, letters, photographs, names of other people that had worked with Dr. Lake. And so I started getting this information, and of course, as I said, Wolford died in June of '87, and all this material was passed to me. Then for roughly almost 10 years, actually, I just told the Lord, when I started getting all this, I said, God, this is good, but if I can't carry the ministry with the same spirit and the same power that Dr. Lake did, then it'll just die, because I'm not going to build a memorial to a man and just talk about a man without being able to reproduce what he did. The glory is to God, not about a man. And so I said that, and I kept studying healing, and then we went down, my son and I went down to Alvin, Texas in 1995 to hear a little woman preach named Pauline Parham, who was Charles Parham's daughter-in-law. And while we were there, we decided to go over to Houston because I had some names and addresses of people that had worked with Dr. Lake when Dr. Lake had a church in Houston back in 1927. And so as I went back and started looking for these people, usually when I find someone, they're usually in the graveyard, they're already dead. But this little woman, Mrs. Jeters, was in a nursing home in Houston.